And Taos unleashes expansive abstract thinkers, and it's from this landscape that we embrace across disciplines, and we represent amongst our group established, mid-career, and emerging artists who show in Taos and northern New Mexico, nationally and internationally. We are an inclusive group that amplifies self-identifying abstract artists living and working in northern New Mexico, honoring our intersecting identities across race, national origin, ethnicity, culture, size, gender identity and expression, disability, sexuality, age, socioeconomic status, neurotype, religion, and/or spiritual practice. All artists are welcome in their pursuit of provocative expression. And that's our mission. And we have been going very strong over the last couple of years with lots more to come. I will do a couple of announcements throughout. And I want to just say now and to folks, we encourage throughout these TAAC talks, if you yourselves have upcoming shows or projects or things like that that you'd like to announce, please feel free and put them in the chat, as we go along, so people can grab those resources, which is really lovely. We are right now having our open call for our second annual group exhibition, which will be at the Stables Gallery in Taos from October 13th through 21st. And we're so excited about that. So if you are interested in applying to that and you're in northern New Mexico, please send your application in. The application deadline is 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time on July 12th. So TAAC Talks are produced and directed by Marc Smith, who is also on the Zoom here, and our resident videographer. And we've done several so far, starting last fall. And this is our first TAAC Talk of the summer. So Clark is here, as I mentioned, here in Taos, but spends most of his time in Kuwait as a professor of art at the American University in Kuwait. So we'll learn more about that, as well as many other really fascinating aspects of his practice. So Clark, welcome. Hi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
The format for how we typically proceed, we'll show the short film, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and a chance for you to share, anything that was not covered in this short film, which, there's so much. We usually do about 25-30 minutes. We'll jump in. So put your thinking caps on. If you have any questions or things you're struck by as we go forward, jot them down, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and stop the video and share the screen. So thanks again for being here, everybody.
We're here at Revolt Gallery.
Yeah.
Which is your brainchild.
One of them.
One of them. What would you say is the reason you started Revolt?
Oh, man. That's a loaded question. Let's see, we've known each other for over 20 years now. We met each other at Webster University in undergrad. At that time, I was a part of another gallery, Fort Gondo.
In St. Louis.
In St. Louis. And if you can recall being at those events, it was exactly what I always wanted to do, was hang art, dumpster dive for food, get free drinks for people, and have a really awesome opening. I think just being a part of that many years ago really stuck with me, and I wanted to redo it all. Here in Taos, where I've lived for 13 years so far.
So I remember after graduation, you told me to come out to Taos, move out here, and you're like, don't go to grad school, don't go to New York. But I didn't listen to you.
Yeah, and now you got debt, right?
Well, sure.
It's besides the point. You're a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Where do you teach?
I teach at the American University of Kuwait.
How did you get there?
Well, after grad school,
Which was where?
I went to Brooklyn College.
Okay.
And I actually studied performance and interactive media art.
Uh-huh.
And I went there to study with Videography. But it was a real collaborative and interactive, interdisciplinary program. And so I was learning a lot of different things because drawing and painting I had that pretty locked down.
Yeah.
And I was also doing graffiti, stenciling, vote, and other things.
Political stuff.
Yeah, real political stuff. And then I was doing performance, activism. I was, big part of Occupy Wall Street, and then I brought out the WikiLeaks truck and had that Occupy Wall Street and took it to Chelsea Manning's trial.
And you're also the sketch artist.
Yeah,
I
drew the courtroom art and made a book out of it. And then, about the time that was published, I'd been an adjunct in New Jersey for like 5 years, and I was ready for a full-time job, and I just threw a wide net out, and I applied to American University of Kuwait in 2016, interviewed with them in DC, and by the end of that summer, I was in Kuwait full-time, and my art changed a lot after that. I started photographing stray cats almost day one, getting there, because they were everywhere, and it was just kind of a reason to start an Instagram account, and that was my first Instagram.
How many Instagram accounts do you have now?
I have 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you consider this a problem, or?
No, I just try to keep them separate. So I've got one with the cats. That was the first one.
Yeah.
And then starting in 2019, I started the body of work that I've been making here and showing here, which I call Thoughts and Prayers. And that's the abstract, geometric, really vibrant paintings and drawings and murals.
Yeah.
And then in November, I announced I'm running for president.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's that. And then the Love to Vote, which I brought back in 2020, and that's how we kind of got back talking to each other.
Yeah. When did you start doing the Love to Vote? Because I remember years and years ago seeing Crazy Clark do these amazing murals all across the country. So,
funny that you asked that. I started that project initially in my 2D design class freshman year. The semester I met you.
Yeah.
And I just kind of put it away for the rest of college. And after I graduated in 2005, I stenciled it on my trailer, and I was traveling across the country, and I took stencils with me, and as I was traveling doing art fairs, I put that up. And I did it all the way up until November 4th of 2008. I was like, all right, halas, I'm done. I'm never going to do this again. And then 2020, I found myself in the U.S. Because of COVID. And I felt like there needed to be an extra push, because voting was definitely a big topic. Still is. The 2020 election is still in the news.
Somewhat.
Yeah. Because somebody still hasn't conceded.
Yeah.
I know that if or when I lose the election, the presidential election, I will concede like a
normal.
Like a mature adult.
Candidate, yeah.
So.
Well.
But like we said, my work has been very political in the past. It was right. Was making work around WikiLeaks, around the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, and
Confederate statues.
Oh yeah,
being erased.
So in 2020, I was also making these videos for my drawing classes, And one of them, one of the videos I made, was on this newspaper. It was like a Confederate, or actually it was a Civil War memorial and battlefield tourism guide. And it was near the end of the semester. I'd kind of run out of paper, so I was telling students to work on different kinds of found objects, or paper, surfaces, materials. And so I had found these tourism guides that had all these photos of Confederate general statues. And so I took Prismacolor pencils, the gray tone pencils, and erased them. And so that caught your eye, I think, and you invited me to do the WTF USA show.
Yes.
Which was kind of your reopening after COVID.
In a way, yeah. It was the build-up.
4th of July weekend.
2021.
2021, yeah. And then after that, you let me do a pop-up in the gallery with all this work that I'd been making over the pandemic, really. And
and that kind of work is your geometrical, abstract, kind of playful pieces. What inspire those pieces for you?
So those pieces are an amalgamation of like everything and nothing at all.
Everything is in your experience.
Yeah, so my experience
in the Middle East, or
in the Middle East, but it's also kind of the culture shock of going from Burning Man one week to being in Kuwait the next week. It's thinking about a virus that's mutating and adapting and changing and spreading. It's inspired by stained glass, street art and graffiti, even science, kind of thinking about viruses, but also thinking about crystals, or thinking about kind of geometry in nature. And then it's heavily inspired by Islamic geometry, sacred geometry.
The rugs.
The
architecture.
Yeah, the mosques I visit. And that's also, it's like a synesthesia. I remember in our first class together, Adam talked about synesthesia.
Yeah.
This idea of experiencing senses in a different sense.
Through different senses.
Yeah. And so, I'm always listening to music when I'm drawing, and I'm allowing that music to also kind of influence the direction I take, because none of the drawings or even the murals are planned so much. They're building rules and breaking the rules and twisting and turning and distorting as I go along, and they're meant to be meditational drawings. And so the idea kind of came out of, I'd been making all this political work, but I moved somewhere where it's not easy to make political work. And
are you speaking of Kuwait?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I guess it's also, I call it thoughts and prayers. And so it comes from this like feeling that I've gotten after any mass shooting, where we have, these debates
every other day.
Yeah. And then the lawmakers, give their thoughts and prayers. It's almost they copy and paste it.
Totally.
Right? Just change the name of the town. And so, it was, and I felt like those are kind of, really superficial, right? And so I wanted to create something where ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
That removing myself from looking at political news and social media, removing myself from that, or kind of getting a detox from that. I allowed myself to really kind of focus through the pandemic, through the 2020 election, and the insurrection afterwards, and all that, by really just focusing on drawing and making a meditational practice that I was doing every day. And then, and just kind of letting drawings come about, rather than everything I had always made was so planned and so systematically set up. It was kind of conceptual art that, just required me to come up with a script and then go out and do it.
Where do you see the evolution of these types of pieces? Where do you see yourself or the pieces at?
Well, I mean, the big evolution, I think, came when I came to Taos.
Uh-huh.
Because up to that point, everything was drawn on a size that I could fit in my carry-on. And so when I came here, you gave me the opportunity to start painting larger, and we started, with like the cellar door and the studio doors, and then you gave me walls and now a big fence, and so and then last summer, I came out and painted SIDS, the containers behind SIDS, and so starting to get out into the public more and taking this work and scaling it up, like I did before with murals, but in this style and
Yeah, they translate really well, I feel.
thanks.
But do you see yourself starting to bring in those subject matters or words or images into these pieces, or do you like them being about nothing? Because you're a very political person,
Right.
and I'm wondering when your art is going to start to have that politicalness to it again,
Well,
or if it will.
This body of work is really an experiment. I've never been a huge fan of abstract art, and I was like, well, what kind of abstract art would I make? And abstract art is actually very political, I think. It does get you to see things that don't necessarily exist, but maybe just are images in our mind. And so a lot of these images are really just, I close my eyes or I subconsciously doodle in a meeting. It's what I see, right? And so, and then I'm also kind of taking the, really structured design and distorting and twisting and breaking the rules with it. So, in these ways, it's like very metaphorically political. It's very edgy work, right? It's hard edge, and it's a full spectrum of color. And so, kind of thinking of the LGBTQ plus spectrum of a flag. Thinking of so there's a lot of that going on, but it's the most subtly political work I think I've made. At one time, I thought about putting messages over it, and that may be where it eventually gets to, but I wanted to get the background figured out first, and
Yeah.
I'm still not even sure I'm there. Like it's still, my work is definitely changing a lot. Every year I'm getting more interested in organic lines and shapes and how I can kind of intersect those with geometric.
And you still have the vocabulary that you did a few years ago when you were doing your word pieces, liberty and justice for all, as an example,
Right.
Black Lives Matter, stencils that could be remade, redone, applied onto whatever surface with different mediums.
Right.
And I feel, time will tell to see what elements go over these abstracted geometric works.
For example, I'd like to have, I was just talking yesterday to Terrence, who's running the Aspen Kids. And I'd like to collaborate with them, but really allow them to kind of paint over my work, interact with it somehow, or kind of lead them into some mural painting workshops. What I really enjoyed last summer was Jisk and I collaborated on a section of the fence, and I think it was really harmonious. His organic, free-flowing style with my geometric background, and I really want to get back into collaboration. Some things I'd like to explore with the Thoughts and Prayers work is having them woven into prayer rugs. I've also experimented with plugging all of my work into AI and seeing what happens with animating it, and like what can I do from transitioning from one drawing to the next and allowing AI to do that. And so as much as I kind of despise AI, I want to play around with it as a tool because it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And then ideally, I'd like to continue painting murals. maybe eventually get to the point where I design the murals. I'm too old to get on a ladder or whatever, and have crews that can paint them.
Yeah. Is that what you see for your future of Taos?
My future with Taos, I mean, Taos is where I'd like to retire. So Taos is kind of interesting to me. When I was 8, I started drawing the Pueblo and southwestern scenes and adobes.
Through visions? Or?
No, I had magazines like National Geographic or tour guides.
And you knew it was Taos?
Taos that's where, like, I was fascinated with Taos Pueblo.
Yeah.
The whole structure just amazed me. I don't know, something about everything about the architecture. And then, I learned more about the community and the heritage and the history. And but I was fascinated with the Southwest. So I was also drawing like chili peppers, lots of landscapes.
Tacos.
No tacos,
No
but
tacos.
lots of peppers.
Okay.
Yeah. I was drawing La Pueblos too. And I was finding them also in like Southwest art magazines. And so I was kind of making my own versions of it, but from like 8 to 12, I drew Taos Pueblo and these Southwest scenes like hundreds and hundreds of times. And I traveled with my dad who did art fairs, and I would set up basically an easel and a little drawing board and sit in a little chair. I would sell this stuff for like $1 to, it eventually got more expensive as I got a little older, but my first one I was selling them for $1 and I was drawing them out like right there with pastels and colored pencils. And I think one thing about this work is it's bringing me back to my childhood a lot.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, because I'm working with ink and colored pencil for the original drawings.
Yeah.
And so, Prismacolors are like the pencil I got when I won an art contest, and I went and used that money to buy a set of Prismacolor pencils. And so is that medium that I've always felt the most comfortable with, like going back to childhood. And so, I used ink and colored pencil for my commercial work that I was selling in college and after. I use it for the courtroom drawings, right? And so the medium has stayed the same, but it's totally changed.
The application, whatnot.
And then, painting the murals with spray paint is kind of reminiscent of my 20s. And in the murals I painted in my 30s. But again, in that style.
Yeah.
I would also say, I think that apart from the Islamic geometric design, a lot of it's inspired by Native American design, and which I was definitely influenced. The Moors kind of influenced Spanish design and Spanish design. So it's kind of playing with this global, like, what does global music design look like, right? Like when you have all these different influences from around the world kind of taking part in that, because it's not all just inspired by living in Kuwait, right? It's
yeah, no, I think it has to be a culmination of.
Well, it's inspired by like visiting India, for example, or Thailand, and that's where the kind of the permission or the courage to use really bright colors, or you even see it in work here, a lot of bright colors. And so I'm trying to like push the line of like how garish can I be and still.
You've been doing that for 20 years.
I know, right? Right. Like my work has always been a little campy. And so I try not to. I guess I'm not really trying to ever make art for an elite crowd, right? My work has always been for the public. It's always been for people mostly, and and I sold work to kind of support that. But the work I love best is what I've been able to put on the internet or put on the streets or cross them over, right? You know, taking street cats and putting them on the internet, or taking WikiLeaks and putting it on the street. And so, yeah, I guess it's really the work I really enjoy best is making work for the public.
And now that you've painted almost every surface in and around Revolt, what do you see your future here as? Are you coming back this summer, or what can we look forward to with Clark?
I plan on coming back this summer,
Uh-huh.
but I really want to collaborate, especially with the kids on the Pueblo. I want to work more in public, in spaces that, I mean, this is a pretty public space.
Yeah, it's very public.
But also kind of looking at places around Taos that could use a touch up, use some beautification.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you know, the work is meant to like inspire bliss and joy and kind of make people have some kind of feelings of happiness. And so, and while I love selling my work, I just as much, if not more, appreciate when more people can see it.
Yeah.
You know.
And take part in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think we've ever done an interview or gotten to talk about, you know, your artistic journey through the years. It's always kind of been in the back of my mind of what is Clark doing? And so it's really,
I ask myself that every day.
it's really nice to sit down with you, Clark,
Thanks.
at Revolt.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what else you do with Revolts in the town of Taos, with all of your new friends that you've made and are showing artwork with. It's an awesome journey, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
It's admirable to see what you've done with Revolt. You know, sparking. I remember when you told me that you were going to open it, and then to see how it's evolved and built, and it's a really a community, right? It's more than, you know. You go to all the other galleries, right? It's either commercial or nonprofit, and while yours is nonprofit, it's not run in that kind of corporate or the, you know, that structure that a lot of nonprofits are. It's really about bringing people together.
Does it make sense from who you knew me as?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you've brought Burning Man to Taos.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? You're kind of the Larry Harvey of Taos in some sense.
Yeah, that's a pretty good name.
Yeah. And you've you've really allowed for a complete mixture of like local talent that doesn't necessarily fit with the Southwest art vibe.
Yeah.
Right. And as well as you know, the indigenous community. You've made a space for, you know, Black and trans and people of color and LGBTQ plus community.
Everyone. Yeah.
Everyone. And so you've attracted a lot of, you know, you've made space for local artists, but you've also made space for me, you know, an international artist who's coming from the other side of the globe, and to have that, you know, to allow local artists to be kind of in the same mix, allow for collaboration, and but I think what you've really built is community here, and that's your art.
Yeah.
You know, we could talk about your art, but I think
another episode.
That's another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Marc. That was great.
So lovely. Yeah, Clark, do you want to, you know, give you a moment to just speak to the video? Did you want to chime in before we jump into questions?
No, it was great working with Marc, and Steve and I had a blast, and yeah, turned out fantastic.
It's such a cool connection, you know, to see, and I should have said this at the beginning, so my apologies to the audience, but Steve McFarland, the, you know, owner director of Revolt Gallery, was in, you know, obviously in dialogue with Clark, and you have such a nice long history of the two of you together. And so, you know, I only realized after this that the two of you had gone to college together, and you know, I love those long, lifelong friendships, and I think that they are such a platform for, obviously, for so many projects. And Steve, who's traveling internationally right now, is unable to be here today, but has contributed so much to the sort of DIY art scene here in Taos and beyond. And I loved what you said about bringing Burning Man to Taos. And it seems like, you know, you're here for the summer for a little bit longer. Max Kaufman is also in town, and you two are collaborating and are going to activate the Revolt space further, which is exciting. We can hear more about that. So, you know, I'd love to just jump in with, you know, and open this up to folks who are in the audience for questions. I also have some questions, but I want to first see from those of you tuning in, if you are struck by anything or have questions. Yeah, it looks like Paul, hi. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you all? Good to see you all. Clark, I just wanted to say I'm very happy to have the opportunity to learn about, you know, what kind of came before this geometric work. The geometric work is pretty much what I know you for. It's what I've most seen around Taos and all that. But it's fascinating to hear about the political art as well. And I think that just adds so many layers to the abstract work. So I'm just happy to get to know a little bit more about your background and get to know your work a little better. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say I appreciate that, and thanks for the opportunity to do that.
Appreciate it coming from you, especially. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, your work is so, you know, dynamic, so graphic. And then, you know, we've learned so much about how it has, you know, come into sort of evolved to this point, and loved hearing more about your earlier works. But it seems to me to be all very connected, especially seeing the videos of the layering, right? These are just layers of experience that you've had over time. And you know, and there's something about the addition and subtraction of imagery to public spaces or to environments that I think is part of the activism. So I'm personally curious to hear a little bit more about that. And, you know, were you always considering yourself to be an advocate, an activist, politically, you know, inspired, motivated? Is this something that just came about in development sort of concurrently with your art practice, or something that you've always sort of been oriented to in life?
I guess, you know, I remember being at a young age going to the school counselor and being depressed, and you know, you tried to figure out what I was depressed about, and it was always like what was in the news. Whatever, it wasn't like anything personal. It was like just, I don't know, whatever the news was at the time. And so, yeah, I mean, I always had like two different things going on. I either had like commercial work and I had this political work on the side, or I got into teaching and I had political work on the side. And I don't know, it's something that I felt like I always needed to do, because I knew art could make a difference. And I've kind of blurred the lines a lot of times between art and activism, or even art and journalism, or journalism and activism. And so, you know, I guess I'm always, this work was supposed to be a departure from political work, or even thinking about politics and the, you know, everything going on in the world. And yet I do find myself, I felt back in November, actually, at like the day that Trump decided to announce he was running for president, I was talking to my wife and my boss, saying like, you know, I really miss making political work. I miss seeing it. And you don't really see that much in Kuwait. So Trump announced he was running, and then I decided I would run against him as a write-in candidate. And so I made these stickers for that's about as far as I've gotten in the campaign. I've got an Instagram account with it, but I obviously haven't put too much time or directed too much time into that campaign, because I find myself almost every day, especially in the middle of the night, just going in and drawing, and that being my place to get a little peace of mind away from the phone. And so, but yeah, I think about kind of like radically distorting things or radically changing things. And that's what has happened with, I think, a lot of the work that you see in the show. Let me show you the show that opened yesterday, which I wanted to actually talk about. Point that you brought up, Lauren, is that Steve is halfway around the world right now traveling, and yesterday we had the Taos Roundup, and we had a group show and my show, and tons of people come through, and he wasn't here, and we didn't even have to contact him at any point yesterday. He's built a community of people that want to make this place successful and make it a place that's different, unique, and music is definitely a big part of Revolt, and allowing the music and the art to kind of coincide is I think what makes this place really unique. And Max and I, who are here for I'm here for July and part of August, and I'm not sure how long Max is here, are we're brainstorming ideas, and for the month of July, we're actually open Thursday through Sunday, noon to 4. And the Revolt has kind of always just been by appointment only, and had a phone number, and Steve would just show up and open the door and let you in. But we're trying to take Revolt to the next level, because it's a whole campus here. It's not just this gallery. It's so let me pull up the pictures. It's also let's see if I can share it. And so, I mean, what I was saying is that he has created this place where he doesn't even have to be here all the time to run it, because people want to get involved. And so this is actually the room I'm sitting in. I'm over here in the corner. And so this is actually 3 years worth of work, kind of starting with this body in 2020. I was doing this, and then got a little bit more complex in these, working, kind of playing with just how to distort a star. And so, or starting with a star and working out, or working from the outside inwards towards a star, but just playing with lots of different concepts of stars. And then, and move over. This is the work that really got me through COVID. This is the 2021, 20, and some of this is 22. And these are kind of my larger size drawings. But also here I was really kind of considering how to play with patterns and distort the patterns. And now that I had a little bit more space, I could kind of still draw shapes at the same scale, but now I could multiply them and repeat them. But then, one way I described it recently was, we think of plaid as kind of running two directions against each other, and how do those different colors and lines um, uh, overlap on one another. And here I try to think about like patterns running three or more directions, and how would they have to kind of consider each other as they pass across one another. And then, thinking about what are the rules of a pattern, and allowing myself to break those rules, but still maintain some visual similarity. And so, I think what's interesting is yesterday was the first time I've ever shown all of this work so close to one another.
Yeah.
And we're on top of each other. And so it really, it's not a big room, but it's just the perfect size for showing, what I've got from this entire collection. And it transforms the room. It's disorienting, but it's also, it's powerful. I don't know. It's
rather magical to be in the space. And it does, I think, because there's such a reference to, maybe the, Byzantine, Middle Eastern tile kind of mosaic quality to the work. You feel like you're in a tiled space, which is, I think, a lovely sort of feature of the way it's been installed.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, this time they're really having to respond to one another rather than being these individual pieces. And so
it's nice to see all these photos together. Thank you so much for this slideshow.
Come back.
That's great. And I really do encourage everybody, if you didn't go yesterday and you're going to be in Taos, to have a chance this month to check it out. I want to see if there are any other questions that folks might have. I have a couple, but I just want to, Bob, go ahead. I think Bob and then Marc.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep, go ahead.
Oh, good. Clark, I went to college and was a part of the Vietnam War protest, got me started politically, and it was a very moving time. We shut down the art department at the University of Colorado, had the red fist on the back of our shirts. The department, the whole department was with us, the students. And so I thought a lot about politics and how it fits into our artwork, and how our artwork, being part of us, is also part of our political being. And so I guess the question is, well, it's kind of a question and a comment. What I see in your work is a kind of a stance politically to do this thing and then to do that thing, to take it separately. And I've thought a lot about that too. And I think that's a very valid stance. In a way, by just making artwork, we're taking a political stance against the machine, against capitalism, unless we should be so blessed as to be part of capitalism. And so I just think it's very interesting how you've come from your background and gotten to where you are now, and they're wonderful to look at. I really like them all together in that in the gallery, and I'll get up there and take a look sometime in the next month. Thank you.
I see Rob Bruns here. So kind of, and you brought up Vietnam, which I immediately put this connection together to someone we recently lost, Daniel Ellsberg. And Rob let me stay with him when I covered the Chelsea Manning trial. And so I think the piece of work that I'm probably most proud of, or has kind of gotten me the most recognition was the WikiLeaks truck and the book of Chelsea Manning's. There's like 300, mostly portraits and kind of courtroom scenes, and I think are actually I'd say it's the most. It's what I'm probably most known for, and probably what I think has been the most successful in making actual change in the world. And Chelsea Manning was the Daniel Ellsberg of my generation, right? And thinking about how the two of them kind of ended a war through this act of courage of bringing light to the public of what was actually going on in either Vietnam or Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, I think a lot about, especially that we're, 10 years ago, 2013, I spent the summer at Rob's, and now I'm at Steve's. But it was probably the most intense art making time of my life. And a lot of this, what I'm doing now, is kind of taking a break from that. It was, that was overwhelmingly stressful, and it was not something I wanted to do. That's why I'm going to say, in the 10-year difference, I was making work not because I wanted to do it, but because I felt it had to be done. And now I decided, especially during COVID, I needed an art practice that for me, I'd never taken a time, to look out for me. I was always trying to make work to change the system somehow, fix something, right? Some injustice that I saw, and now, it's a little bit selfish, but it's, I guess, what I needed to kind of calm my nerves. I mean, I also still have this Instagram where I'm just calling for Trump to be arrested every day, and if our current president or the DOJ won't do it, let me be president, I'll do it. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm still actively angry, but I'm channel that energy, I think, into the work that I'm making now, and that's why it's so intense. I mean, it's intense. It kind of depicts my kind of edgy, vibrant, and kind of, I don't know of a better word than intense personality sometimes. So.
Well, they're very layered, very saturated. I think the thing that I noticed when I spent a lot of time in the gallery yesterday and the day before, just getting really close to the pieces. And so I'm an art therapist and an artist. And one of the things that I think about when I'm working with people or just viewing art in general is I'm, very process driven. So I think about, what is the artist's relationship to their material? How do they use it? You could be with your Prismacolor pencils and I could be sitting with my Prismacolor pencils, and we could be drawing the same thing and it will look completely different because of the way in which you're relating to the material. So you are getting so much saturation, and you have you have to hold the pencils, so your grip to help to achieve this is intense, right? It's a strong grip to actually get the quality and the density of the work. And so there's something embedded in your relationship to the material itself that communicates quite a lot. And I know in the video you say that it's sort of meditational work, and this idea of thinking and praying is this sort of a layer or a wall or a veneer, or this phrase that has become a bit of this throwaway phrase that we hear in politics all the time. And yet, the emotionality of standing with your work and hearing that phrase, for me at least, and just I'll speak for myself, feels like, I guess I beg to differ from Steve in some ways, because I feel like there's a real strong abstract metaphor operating within this entire series. And so I appreciate that quite a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel it. But yeah, I encourage everyone to, if you can make it down, come feel it for yourself. I mean, I can't really show you the details other than if you can blow it up on your Instagram. But the work has this sheen to it from Prismacolor that I've loved since I was 8 years old. And I've worked in new media and performance and all sorts of things. I've even worked a lot with black and white and gray tone colored pencils. The reason I have so many gray tones, I give them to my drawing one students all the time, is because if I bought sets that have them and I just like, I put
Just
those
get
away.
rid of those right away. That's great.
So this work doesn't feature any black or any white. I don't use black or white whatsoever.
Okay.
And I think that because I'm trying to get out of this black and white notion, but then I also do I do a lot of black and white work that's when color isn't necessary, because I don't know, I'm sure many of you have this great feeling when you walk in an art supply store and you see all the colors, like, and your mind must, I don't know, I'm sure I'm not the only one who goes into the art supply store and just sees like possibilities, right? And just anything could happen from here. But you also just love how paints are displayed and there's just all the colors. For me, that's, I get that feeling, when I'm in Cairo at a fabric souk, or in India or Thailand, and I see, this is kind of what I try to replicate in the gallery here, is this kind of tiny space that has all these, different tapestries or different pillowcases or whatever they're selling hanging on the wall, okay, not leaving much space between. And and so feeling that kind of intensity of color and shapes is what I try to achieve here with the way this work is all displayed. So,
thanks, Clark.
I
want to
I'll
see if
take
there are
another
other
question.
questions. Yeah, other questions in the audience. Marc, I guess, go ahead, please.
Hey, Clark. This is a lot of fun to put this together and get like a new window into your stuff. And I'm sorry that I missed your opening, and it looks really awesome to see all of this together. I had no idea sort of the total scope of it all. So I look forward to coming over when I get back in town. And there were so many things that were on my mind as I sort of rewatched the video and then hearing you talk about it. First one was the Thoughts and Prayers title struck me because it's embedded and about a song that I've written. So like immediately the connection and that phraseology, which sounds like to you as to me, just creates total rage because of its overuse and just the horrific way it's applied all the time. The second thing I had to say is there is a shack down in Arroyo Hondo that desperately needs your art. And I'm going to tell you where it is because it would be kick-ass. It's across from Midtown Lounge in Arroyo Hondo. And the other thing I wanted to ask, because it didn't make into our video, was about like your teaching. I think you'd spoken about that in the interview with Steve. So I just wanted you to maybe, if you could talk a little bit about that, your feelings about working with your students, watching them develop. I remember you had some stuff to say about that, and I think you called it a creativity class. So anyway, could you just sort of talk a little bit about the impact that your teaching has on this whole trajectory of yours and sort of, where you place it a little bit?
Right. I mean, I try to help students find their voices, and and that can be like purely aesthetic, but sometimes I have students who are making work about social and political issues that are taboo, and so we kind of discuss like where the lines or how to like navigate that. I have students who are making a lot of graphic design and illustration work, and so I'm always trying to build like them both aesthetically and technically, but also conceptually. And so I'm trying to get them to make work about something that is personal to them, or I think the one thing that I've found that works for that intro to creativity class, which is this, is open to non-majors. So I have all sorts of students that from all sorts of majors that take it, but I get them really brainstorming in that class. And the thing that I do is I have them write lists of things that they love and they hate about themselves, their community, the nation, whatever that is, whether the one they're living in or the one they're from, and the world, right? And so things they want to change and things that they want to keep about themselves and their community, which can be anything between +1 to less than the nation, right? And any kind of community that they exist in online, or a team or a club or a group or whatever, their neighborhood, right? And then the nation, the world, right? And so they start to list all the things that they're most passionate about, both positive and negative. And then they start connecting the dots between like, well, this thing that I think about on a global scale, I actually think about personally as well. And so we start with that list, and then I have them make another list of what ifs. So start the top of the page says what if, and I tell them to write as many sentences as possible that kind of relate to the things that they had just been putting in their love-hate lists. And then from there I have them write down people, places, and things that relate. What does, if this what if question were to actually come true or be something that actually happens, what would be the people, places, and things? And lastly, what are the ideas that what are the metaphors that you can attach to this idea, right? And so and from there, anything goes. I let them like choose whatever kind of projects they want from a menu. But then I also teach like kind of more technical classes like illustration and drawing, where it's kind of we all had to do it. We all had to take that class. So
Thanks, Clark. Thanks, Marc, for that question. Any other questions from the audience? Probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I think one of the questions, Clark, that popped up that it wasn't included was, if you could be something other than an artist in life, what would that have been? And I don't know if that's an easy thing to answer or not.
Oh, I think this got cut,
Yeah.
Marc.
This went into the editing bin, but I'm curious about it, so I want to know.
So halfway through grad school, I had like a breakdown in class, and I was like holding my head. The professor's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I should have gone to law school." And then right after that, I spent like 3 years in courtrooms, 3 or 4 years in courtrooms, drawing. I was listening, and then I'd been arrested enough times that I kind of seen how arraignment worked out, pre-trial. So I got arrested for graffiti and activism and the WikiLeaks truck, and never been convicted. Still clean. Yeah. So I think I wanted I don't know, like, but here's the problem is like the kind of lawyer I want to be, that's not a very easy life. Like, or and to get to where that isn't as easy as the lawyers that I wanted to be who represented me. Like I've always wanted to be the lawyers that either represented me or someone I admired.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think I don't know. I guess. But I went to theater school for my first semester of college. I realized within a couple of weeks that I didn't want to be an actor. I would have been a director. I think I would have liked directing movies or theater. Yeah, if
I can see that.
yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
But not. Yeah, I don't want to be. I after also sitting through a court trial,
I bet.
you know, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer either.
Well, you have such
But
a
I also realized it's not as difficult as I think we believe it is. It's a lot of work though. It's a lot of reading. So
yeah.
I'd rather be drawing than reading.
I was just thinking, I mean, you have such an interesting window being, in the courtroom, doing those illustrations, like really just, you have a window that so few of us get to have. And so it's a fascinating part of your experience and no doubt informs a lot of your thinking and your work, day to day. So thank you so much. I want to float it back out if anyone has any questions or comments, any last chances. If not, I encourage folks. Oh, Carrie, go ahead. Oh, wait.
I just wanted to say, Clark, that when I
Yeah.
first saw your work, I had this sense of being back in a comic book from when I was a kid with the Yowza and the Kapow and all that stuff. And it was, I remember thinking, I was like, wow, that guy's like, I don't know, 50s and 60s practically. And then as you're with it, which I think is one of the great joys of art, is just to sit with it. I can feel that meditative thing that you talk about. And the kapow recedes and the yowza is less. It's there. Don't get me wrong. I still feel that.
No,
but
I mean,
I enjoy
it is there.
Yeah.
But
I like
so
I like that.
that well,
I was just saying, I like
Rob definitely knows this.
Go ahead.
Rob and Susanna know that I used to live with a superhero as a roommate.
Okay.
And he had thousands and thousands of comic books. And after Hurricane Sandy, I came into possession of all those comic books. And I really kind of didn't have comic books as a kid. So this was my time in my like mid-30s to like catch up on comic book reading. But we also designed and I painted, we manufactured superhero armor. And so that certainly is like worked its way into my psyche of art that I've I was reading the comic books really to get a sense of how to make a graphic novel, but also just really enjoy it. I plan on doing a lot more risograph prints where I print the colors separately, but I use black as an outline because I've experimented with that, and it has this really interesting comic book quality to it that gives it a little nostalgia, and I really appreciate, and so I've got some of those in the works, but I'm trying to build a body of those before I'm ready to like kind of launch them again. I launched one like 2 years ago. It sold out like that, and I was like, okay, well, this is probably what I should kind of focus on, is like a more accessible item. I think Rob had his hand raised. Rob, how are you doing, buddy?
Rob had this. I think this is our last question. So Rob, take it away.
Uh-oh. You're muted, Rob. Uh-oh. Here we go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. How are you?
Good to see you. it's been a while. Clark and I go back as far back as Occupy Wall Street and New York and DC. And yeah, hey, listen, I sent you a link for that movie, or suggestion for that movie, Sunlit Night. Were you able to watch that?
I've been putting up an art show. I've been traveling around and putting up an art. I haven't done anything other than get this gallery ready, and yeah.
Well, it's that movie is tailor fit for you. It's about graffiti, and this girl from New York City, she goes out to like the outer banks of Norway, and she starts working as an apprentice or internship with this graffiti artist, very talented, and he's supposed to be popular, well known. And in the middle of the movie, he talks about how colors interact with each other. And it's my mother went to Parsons and she studied color, and she would teach me, how different colors change each other. So I was curious about your art, your abstract kaleidoscope style. Do you plot out, what is your process of which color goes to the next color?
Yeah, I think that's like what I'm thinking about a lot, the most, or at least when I like stop and think while I'm drawing, is it's kind of taking everything you ever learned in color theory and making it like a sense rather than something that you, for me, like I couldn't take the time to be scientific about it, so I oftentimes just have to like make a decision and trust it. But then I'm thinking of like the value of colors next to each other, where they are on the color wheel. And I also, a lot of times I think about it as almost like gerrymandering and making a map, and like, how am I going to fit these spaces around each other and not have those colors, like the same color touch, right? And so, one thing you'll notice is that very, very rarely does the same color touch on a plane together or share an edge. They do come to points often, and that's meant to happen. And then, and I'm working a lot more with gradients now, and kind of thinking about, where I can take a hue and give it, different value, add shade and tint to it, or run it through a spectrum in the gradient, and how that's going to relate to the shape next to it. I mean, that's constantly going through my mind. I think that's like the most like decision making I'm constantly doing, right? And so sometimes I think of these as like these really weird maps where I'm zoning out space to be a city. And I think that one thing I'm really trying to do is have diversity and equity with my colored pencils, right? I'm trying to make sure every color is represented. I'm trying to make sure everything fits in together. And so it's about making spaces for the next shape, or yeah. But then I start with a bunch of rules and I kind of break them and have to adapt. And it's constantly about, like, okay, well, I made this and then adapted. And then I think I mentioned it, it's the last line of my artist statement. It's like, it all really kind of just started from sitting in meetings, and I just draw on my notebook or the agenda page and cover the page with lines and shapes, and then I decided, like, well, what if I took that and made it more colorful and bigger, worked in the materials I like.
So I was
I'll watch
also
the movie, Rob. I have some free time coming up. I'll watch the movie, I promise.
okay. Mostly
Right.
curious, like you and I have a history of activism together.
Yeah.
And when you first moved to Kuwait, I was a little concerned that you might get yourself in trouble and wind up in a Kuwaiti prison. So how was
There's
that
still
transition for you?
It's been good. It really has been. I think it relieved a lot of my stress of like trying to run a business and be an adjunct professor. It relieved, or I think I'm making more metaphorically political work, and so for me, the cat photos, we really haven't talked about that. It's been a 7-year project of kind of just going around, like traveling, walking around, but also showing this metaphor of homelessness and this radical self reliance and resilience. And so because photographing people isn't so easy to do there, and so I started with that. I have been photographing recently migrant workers on their day off, which was a project that Taos-based started in Doha, and showing migrant workers in the Gulf region wearing their own clothes, and it's called Doha Fashion Fridays or Kuwait Fashion Fridays. And so just I maybe being less in your face about my politics, although the presidential campaign, of course, is probably more in your face of my political views than it's ever been. But I used to end up on the wrong, I had to separate the Instagram accounts just so that I wasn't confusing people too much. And so, but I've always been juggling like 2 or 3 different projects and styles, and also being a graphic designer, educator, like trying to do all these things at once. And so Kuwait has allowed me to slow down a lot and get my personal life in order. I got married. She's there, she's eating, but she's there, and allowed me to really focus on I have to be honest, the one thing that I love most about art, or the art making career or job that I love most, is teaching. And so, and when they hired me, they asked, your art is going to change, and your audience is going to change, and how do you feel about that? And I was like, I need some boredom and some time, and I need time to work, and so it's been like a 7-year artist residency where I've had a lot of time to like kind of collect my thoughts and make art that brings me more joy than it ever has in the past. Rob, how like it was agonizing, like having to go to a military base and behave myself, and that's not the summer I wanted.
I bet.
Right, summer, like you were the highlight of summer of 13. But it was like activism was, driving that WikiLeaks truck was constant paranoia, and so a lot of this is about kind of getting back to myself and getting. But I'm still angry. Still not happy with the world and particularly the U.S. government. And so, but I don't know. We'll see.
I have a question for Lauren.
I might have to come back to Virginia soon and do some more courtroom drawings, from what I understand.
Oh, cool.
Oh no, it's not cool. I'm pretty sure Julian's getting extradited very soon.
Oh wow.
So
I have a question for Lauren.
Okay. Oh, well, this is officially our last question then. And I will do my best to field it.
I want you to analyze Clark's work.
Oh, well, that's a much longer answer, and probably a whole nother lecture. And
probably very complicated.
Yeah, yes, I do appreciate that. And I think actually I'll just say, I think that the best art therapists out there do not actually analyze other people's work, that they seek to really understand what the artist was trying to, authentically share. So it's really, whenever I'm working with my own clients, I try not to impose my own frame on their work and really try to understand where they're at and what they're trying to express. So I'll just say that, and then I'm going to zip it. And I appreciate your question though very much.
Let me add to
glad
that.
to talk about art therapy in other contexts. But we are a little bit at time, but this has been fascinating. I will also say, Clark, you are our first presidential candidate to be in a TAAC talk. So thank you for that. And thanks to our audience for participating. This is a historic moment. Please get a campaign sticker from Revolt Gallery when you go to visit Clark's show, which is really phenomenal to see in person, truly. And there's so much we could talk about. Clark, thank you for sharing your practice with all of us, and your depth of inquiry and your activism. It's really inspiring, and we're glad to have you as part of our collective in the summer and remotely. I want to remind everybody to apply for our fall call. We will have another TAAC talk with C. Marquez. I think we are doing that in September, so stay tuned. And this, as all of our TAAC talks have been recorded, this will also be archived and available on our YouTube channel. You can get all of those links at our website, taosabstractartistcollective.com. So thank you all. Have a safe and happy holiday weekend, extended weekend, and see you next time. Thank you so much, Clark. Thanks, Marc, for making the video.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everyone,
Our
for
pleasure.
showing up.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.